Good morning, everyone. What a great turnout. And we have a long-standing tradition of having bright, sunny days, so the tradition is withheld. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 52nd Annual Deborah Morton Convocation Ceremony. I'm Mark Dwyron, Chair of the University of New England Board of Trustees. On behalf of the trustees, I would like to thank you for coming today and joining us in this wonderful tradition. We are here to honor 4 outstanding Maine women here to receive today's awards: Eleanor Baker, Ann Lynch, Lois Galgay-Rickett, and Dr. Barbara Verreau. The Deborah Morton Convocation and Awards ceremony is an honored tradition of the Westbrook College. You'll find further information printed in your program, and momentarily, Lori LaChance, chair of the Deborah Morton Steering Committee, will share the history of this prestigious award and society. As you will later hear from Lori, this 19th century woman, Deborah Morton, was quite progressive in her time. We hope that our students will take what they learn here and improve their surrounding communities the way that Deborah Morton and our award recipients here today have done. I know you will join me in celebrating their remarkable accomplishments. It is now my pleasure to introduce the woman who chaired the committee that chose today's award recipients, 2009 Deborah Morton Award winner, Lori LaChance.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Mark. Welcome, the Deborah Morton Society members and the inductees. Welcome, families and friends, and particular welcome and thanks to our hosts, the families, the students, the faculty, the administration, and the board of the University of New England. This is one of my favorite events of the year, and the reason it's one of my favorites is because it is so uplifting and inspirational. It's also very affirming as a female leader. So it's just a day that leaves you feeling great about life in general and about your career and in living and working in the state of Maine. It's also a great honor to reconnect with the women who were previously inducted in the Deborah Morton Society. Many of these ladies are people who I've looked up to, who have been mentors and guides in my journey. And it's a great joy to be here as we hear the stories of those being inducted today and welcome them into the family and the community of Deborah Morton Society. Each leadership path is unique and it's inspirational in its own right, and it is certainly worth celebrating, something we do far too infrequently. I've long been a student of leadership, and I'm fascinated by what factors and what attributes lead people to be successful. I just finished Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. In it, he identifies at least 4 factors that tend to lead to success. The first, not surprisingly, is hard work. In his book, he estimates it takes about 10,000 hours of work for anyone to master their craft or to become really excellent at what they do. And undoubtedly, the women of the Deborah Morton Society have put in 10,000 times how many hours to reach the success in their career and in their lives. The second is your ancestry and your heritage. Mr. Gladwell suggests that you are where you are from. And I think if all of us think about that, how very important our family roots are, our community roots, where we come from really shapes who we become later in life and the values that we hold dear. The third factor is when you were born, the era where you became of age. Sometimes it's even down to the month that you were born that can determine which path to success you take and what opportunities you're given. And finally, what opportunities were you given as you grew? Did you have a mentor? Were you at the right place at the right time? Did you take the risk and seize the opportunity that was put before you? The Deborah Morton Award was first presented in 1961, and it is the first annual award in Maine that honors and celebrates the success of female leaders. The award honors Deborah Morton, who was valedictorian of the Westbrook Seminary's class of 1879. Deborah is described as a teacher, a dean, a linguist, a historian, a civic leader, and a pioneer. She studied in France and Germany. She traveled the globe. She made 14 trips to Europe and the Near East. By all accounts, she was a modern woman. But this was over 100 years ago. Think for a moment what that must have been like. What barriers did she face? What prejudices did she overcome? And what are the many things that she did for us to pave the way and to give us opportunities that maybe she might have only dreamed of and never imagined that she could have for herself? Today we celebrate Deborah Morton. We celebrate the prior award winners who have inspired, encouraged, and mentored us. And we celebrate 4 amazing women who will now forever touch us with the stories of their path of leadership. Congratulations to all the inductees, and welcome to all.
Thank you very much, Lori, and I would like to also welcome all of you to this wonderful event. I agree with President LaChance. This is one of my favorite days of the year as well, and I think about walking across this campus. For over 180 years, women have come here to be inspired and to inspire others, and so today is one of those very special days that seem to occur with sunshine, at least for the 8 years that I've been here. They're always magical. We're very pleased. I want to thank our board chair, Mark Dryron, for being here, and particularly want to thank Lori for her leadership of this group over the past year. It is the oldest group in Maine to recognize women, and I think as a Maine native, she has been a wonderful leader for our committee that has looked at and chosen our awardees for this year, and these are incredible standards that this group has held to. The committee this year, chaired by Lori, included Meg Baxter, Pat Collins, Dodie Detmer, Ruth Foster, Sister Mary Norberta, and Geraldine Donahue Patterson, Dr. Catherine Pope, and Joni Benoit Samuelson. So I'd like to thank all of them. Over the past 52 years, 193 women have been named as part of the Deborah Morton Award. This, affectionately, internally, we call them the Debbies, because these are amazing women. And when you look back over the past half century in the state of Maine, these women, there are fingerprints of Deborah Morton awardees on almost every good thing that you find in Maine. It truly is an amazing group of women who have been at the heart of civic and social responsibility to the state. I would like to recognize all the past award winners that are here with us today and ask you to stand and be recognized, please. I would also like to just take a moment and note the wonderful Deborah Morton Society members who have passed since our last convocation. The Honorable Caroline Glassman, Edith Harry, Beverly Howman, Gerda Haas, and Anna Pride. Could we all take just a moment, please, of silence and give thanks for their presence? Thank you. We will miss them. Maine has a history. It's something I didn't know until I came here, but a history of women who provided outstanding, thoughtful, courageous, and compassionate leadership. And recognizing these women and being chosen by a committee of your peers is really a high distinction, I think, for any woman who is selected for this society. They are chosen for distinction in their careers and in public service, for their leadership in civic, cultural, and social causes. I hope all of our students who are here with us today will be inspired by the women that we're honoring. Today's awardees all inspire confidence in the belief that individuals can make a difference. Their accomplishments are great, and I look forward to hearing their inspiring words, and I want to thank you all for joining us in honoring them. And I would now like to ask University trustee Cynthia Taylor to step forward and present her Deborah Morton Award candidate.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees of the University of New England, it is my pleasure to present the 2013 Deborah Morton Award to our recipient, Eleanor M. Baker.
Thank you. I'm going to read about you for a minute. Just right there. Ellie Baker is co-founder and managing principal of Baker, Newman & Noyes, one of the nation's top 200 accounting and consulting firms with locations in Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. Ellie is focused on high net worth individuals and families in the area of tax and personal financial planning. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Maine, a JD from the University of Maine School of Law, and an LLM in taxation from Boston University School of Law. She also holds the Personal Financial Specialist designation. She is a trustee at the University of Maine System and the University of Maine School of Law Foundation. She also serves as a trustee at Maine Public Broadcasting Network and a trustee and finance chair for the Executive Committee of the Portland Symphony Orchestra. A passionate, engaged community leader, Ellie is the recipient of the 2013 American Heart Association's Crystal Heart Award for her continued support and promotion of the organization's missions. And now I'd like to invite her to give us remarks. This is for you. Oh, thank you. That's great. Ellie Baker.
Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see so many friendly faces here. I've been with you guys for a long time. It's been fun. I was asked to keep this very short and sweet, so that's what I intend to do, and I am going to use my glasses because I'll miss something if I don't. So if I didn't have to wear this awful hat, it would be easier. President Rippich, Chair Doran, Dr. LaChance, Deborah Morton Society members, all, trustees, faculty, staff, all you great students over there, and other distinguished guests. I want to begin my remarks by congratulating the other three amazing women that are being honored today. Dr. Barbara Verreau, who I had the pleasure of meeting just this morning and hiding her cane from her hip surgery, had the vision to see the need for a more patient-centered healthcare model by founding Penobscot Community Healthcare. I dare say that she was well before her time. Ann Lynch has contributed greatly to the Maine community with her work as executive director of the Center for Grieving Children, which, to my surprise, has celebrated its 25th year. Thank you, Ann, for this important, compassionate service. Last, but certainly not least, to my friend of 34 years, Lois Galgay-Reckitt. How honored I am to stand here with you today. Lois has worked tirelessly to protect Maine women who have or who could be hurt by domestic violence. Family Crisis Services was the very first community board that I ever served on. I was only 25 or 26 years old at the time. And I noticed when I was in Proctor Hall and I used the ladies' room, there was a little placard stuck to the mirror about Family Crisis Services. So you are everywhere. So thank you, Lois, for all of your encouragement and support over the years. I'm thrilled that you are being honored here today. Finally, I thank the members of the steering committee for selecting me for this award. I accept with all humility. No one has any measure of success without a lot of help from others. I am no exception. The two defining principles of my life have been to love what I do and be myself. As I come closer to the end of my career, I am grateful for the opportunities that I have had to help steer a business, participate on the boards of some significant cultural, educational, and human service entities, and most important to me, help mentor the next generation. I am grateful for the encouragement that the Deborah Morton Society Award gives me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ellie. I will now call upon University Trustee Emeritus Vince Fury to present his Deborah Morton Award candidate.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees of the University of New England, it is my pleasure to present the 2013 Deborah Morton recipient, Ann Lynch.
Ann Lynch was appointed Executive Director of the Center for Grieving Children in July of 2001 after serving as the center's Outreach Director and Education Coordinator and facilitating the center's Bereavement Peer Support Program as a volunteer for 3 years. Her introduction to the center was as a family participant who sought support. In 2005, she spearheaded a $2.8 million capital campaign that provided a permanent home for the center's unique grief support programs, serving children and their families, bereaved parents, young widows, widowers, partners, and children resettled locally from war-torn countries. She has also produced a significant expansion of the center's program to train providers and volunteers nationwide and to volunteer support model to help grieving children and families. And this is someone who took her own grief and has turned it into a positive force, and we're honored to have you today, Ann Lynch.
Thank you, Madam President, UNE Board of Trustees, fellow honorees, members of the Deborah Morton Society, family and friends. It is an honor to be inducted to the Deborah Morton Society. I have been fortunate to have many people in my life who have inspired me and been great mentors and role models. Some have been teachers and educators, some have been the leaders of businesses and organizations, and some have been the children and families I have met through the Center for Grieving Children. Personally and professionally, I have tried to stay open to the opportunities for inspiration and action that life has presented me. Growing up in Ireland, I had many influences, starting with my own parents. They sacrificed so much that I would get all the opportunities possible, and especially that I could attend college. My college years were devoted to business studies and a diploma in education. I was drawn to working with high school students in a disadvantaged area. Many of them were the first in their family to attend high school and go on to college, a reflection of my own life. In Ireland, I worked as a teacher for 10 years. And it was also in Ireland that I began the most inspirational role I have played, the role of parent to my children, watching them grow. When the children were 9, 7, and 5 years of age, we moved to the United States. As you can imagine, this was a huge change in our lives, one that was embraced. But when we were here just 2 years, our wonderful lives were rocked to the core. My 10-year-old daughter, Quiva, died suddenly. The struggle began to continue parenting my 2 sons, Declan and Owen, while I was so deep in my grief, and they were grieving as well. This experience was life-altering, and as I responded to my and my family's needs, a new course for my life was set in motion. I became aware of the Center for Grieving Children. Founded over 26 years ago, the center was only the 3rd place of its kind in the US to provide peer support groups for children and families experiencing loss and grief. I feel blessed to have met and been inspired by the center's founder, Bill Hemmons, before he died in 1998. When Bill's adult sister died, leaving a young daughter, he was determined that there should be appropriate loving support for his young niece and other children. He gave up his career as a stockbroker, tapped into his life savings, flew across the country for training in the peer grief support model, and came back to Portland to recruit volunteers and financial resources needed to launch the Center for Grieving Children. He had a vision of the kind of support that should be available to grieving families. Support that includes the gift of being able to safely share feelings and experience with others who are experiencing grief. When I attended the center with my two sons, I gained huge insights from the other families that attended, and I was so impressed with the volunteers who facilitated our peer support groups that I hoped one day that I would be strong enough to be a volunteer. When that time came, I went through the center's training for volunteer facilitators. I met Linda Kelly. Linda was the center's program director, and she believed I could be a facilitator. She became a mentor and has continued to be an inspiration in my life. Becoming a support group facilitator was a huge step for me in my grief journey. My work at the center had begun. Sometime later, the opportunity came to take on the role of outreach coordinator at the center. It was while I served in that role that a student at Portland High School was killed in a car crash, and the center was asked to offer crisis support. It was a moving experience for me to see all the students gathered in the auditorium. A great number of them were resettled in Maine from other countries, and several came up to me after the gathering and talked about the people they had seen die in their homelands. This brought to light to me that there were many children in Portland living in families and communities that struggled with grief every day. These children had lost their homelands and often family members. When I talked with Gail Chinelli, who was then executive director of the center, she embraced the idea of the center doing more for these children. I reached out to the community to start the center's multicultural peer support program. It is now beginning its 17th year of service, working today in partnership with Portland Public Schools. It has gained national recognition as an innovative and effective model. Gail is another inspiring role model I am grateful to have met along my journey. When she retired from the center in 2001, several people began encouraging me to take on the challenge of becoming executive director. I confess that at first I resisted. It seemed a huge shift to draw on my education in business to go on to lead a nonprofit. But I began to see that my love for children and education and my own loss experience could come together in service for center families and the growth of the center itself. I became drawn to the challenge of furthering the work of Bill and begun what Bill had begun and Gail and Linda had continued. I was appointed executive director of the center shortly before the tragedy of September 11th. Soon after, the center was approached by a group of veteran camp directors and high-level leaders in New York to help create a summer camp that would include grief support for hundreds of children of first responders and others who had died on that awful September day. This began the center's 10-year involvement with America's Camp, an annual gathering of generous, inspiring, compassionate and talented children, teens and adults who included the center staff and volunteers. 2 years ago, I was proud to travel to Washington, D.C. for a Pentagon ceremony honoring the special work of the centers of America's Camp. From the beginning, serving as the center's executive director reinforced for me the great need for a national voice in this country about children and grief. That's why I worked with inspiring, committed colleagues from grief programs beyond Maine to create the National Alliance for Grieving Children. We launched the Alliance over 10 years ago, and at that time we used the center's address in Maine and an extra file cabinet in our office. Today, the National Alliance has its own director and staff, hosts an annual symposium, which we actually held 1 year at UNE, and is a network for sharing resources among 300 grief programs for children and families. I have felt inspired all along the way by the vision of so many people involved with the center, and never more than when we concluded the capital campaign that made possible our welcoming center home on Forest Avenue. Working shoulder to shoulder with the volunteer leaders of our capital campaign was a privilege. Their energy and dedication was remarkable. I am grateful to the role models in both my native and adoptive homelands for the support, inspiration, and teaching they have given me. The vision, generosity, and bravery of role models can change lives and has changed mine. I will leave you with a quote I like very much from Eleanor Roosevelt: "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." Thank you, Gaurav Mahagat, August Gonairi and Boherlat.
Thank you, Anne, for sharing your story with us today. And now I would like to call upon University trustee Gerald Talbot to present his Deborah Morton Award nominee.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees of the University of New England, it is my pleasure to present the 2013 Deborah Morton Award recipient to Lois Galgay Reckett.
Lois Galgay Reckett has served as the Executive Director of the Family Crisis Services since 1990. She had previously been Executive Director from 79 to 84, and from there left for the nation's capital to serve as Executive Vice President for the National Organization for Women, and later Deputy Director of the Human Rights Campaign Fund. So as you can see, this has been a lifetime journey. She has been at the forefront of Maine's efforts to stop domestic abuse and assist its victims, and has lobbied for stronger laws against abuse and pushed for aggressive enforcement of those laws. With her help, the legislature has passed major reforms in the area of domestic violence, including anti-stalking legislation, a domestic violence homicide review panel, and gun control measures for abusers. And now I'd like to give you the opportunity to hear from Lois.
Well, it's interesting. Each of us honorees has taken a totally different tact on our remarks. So first I want to thank Ellie Baker for doing all the thank yous that I should have done at the beginning of my remarks and have not, so just ditto Ellie, who is indeed a very old friend. And one of my mentors when I first began to try to figure out how to be an executive director. Not that she knew how to do the whole thing, but she knew how to do a piece of it that I had no clue about. I want to just try to give you a snippet of the sections of my life that brought me to this place. Starting with my university experience, which was at Brandeis University, which I often tell people is the place where I learned to think. Then I went to graduate school and learned how to memorize again, but I learned to think at Brandeis. And while I was there, I experienced, in the approximate order, the Cuban Missile Crisis, picketing of the administration building for parietal hours, which means we wanted visitation in the boys' dorms. Very important issue at the time. I saw Malcolm X speak on campus. I was in organic chemistry lab when JFK was assassinated. I experienced the Great Blackout in the Northeast when I was a senior. And I survived one of my most serious broken hearts. My regrets at Brandeis are really not terribly many, except I regret not taking advantage of every single opportunity that was presented to me there. And I urge the students in the audience to make sure you take advantage of every single opportunity you have while you're in college. I also did a very foolish thing, and I passed up the opportunity to board a bus to the March on Washington, which was just commemorated. And so I've been in regret mode this summer. From there, after Boston University, which I sort of skip over easily, my year at teaching, my very first teaching job at the Southern Maine Vocational Technical Institute at the time. The things I loved there, I loved teaching. I loved the students, and I loved marine biology. I still do. I'm fascinating to the grandkids at the beach. What I hated at SMVTI was the sex discrimination that I suffered there in both position and in pay. There were only 11 women students there at the time I taught. There were 3 women faculty. I got paid almost nothing for teaching the same caseload as the class load as my male companions. The other piece that I hated there was the sexual harassment that came there.
from the faculty, from the administration. And at that time, there was no name for that phenomena. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that it was inappropriate for them to tell me I had to lengthen my skirts or leave, or that I had to change how I spoke to students. And I said to them, I remember one day saying, you know, if you tone down the language so that it's the 5th grade, how do you expect college students to learn if they have to learn to ask me if they don't understand the word? And it was really, that wasn't the sexual harassment, but that was just sort of the pressure of being a new person, 23 years old at SMVTI teaching. Most of the students were older than I was, and every time we flunked someone, they went to the Vietnam War. And in fact, one of my students is on the wall on the memorial in DC. So from there, because they didn't recontract me, because I was a bit of a troublemaker, although my real regret really is not having the moxie to stir up more trouble than what I did, which was urging of the students to break the dress code at SMVTI, which they did do with the help of the Maine Civil Liberties Union. But that was interesting. From there, I went to the YWCA, where I spent 10 years discovering, while I was there, the women's movement and the National Organization for Women, discovering Title IX, which I helped with the passage of, the Equal Rights Amendment that we lost the fight for passage. I was there for the famous Roe v. Wade abortion decision. I was interviewed by the press in my backyard when Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed the very first woman to the U.S. Supreme Court. We began at that time the legislative fight for lesbian, gay, bi, trans equality in Maine, although we didn't have those last 2 words at the time. We only had lesbian and gay. I found there my capacity for organizing and political action, and as a consequence, my photo was on the front page of the New York Times, which got me in a lot of trouble. That's another whole story. Anyway, what I did discover there was the ability to lead, follow, and occasionally get out of the way. The poverty that they're linked to sex discrimination. We were paid so poorly at the YWCA. I'm looking out at Regina Phillips, whose mother was on the board of the Y at the time when I was there, and she too was distressed by the fact that the women there were getting paid so poorly. The janitors got paid more because they had families to support. I also discovered there my sexuality, which was sort of a amazing discovery at age 33. My regrets at the Y, losing the fight for fair and equitable wages there, and losing the Equal Rights Amendment while I was employed there. My early years at Family Crisis Services, which used to be called the Family Crisis Shelter, I unearthed at that time the passion that came from finding my life's work. I say to people in speeches now, occasionally, I am such a lucky person because I get to do with my life what I was put on the planet to do, and not many people get that chance. And so I urge you to try to find that peace that burns that passion in you. I also found my capacity to raise funds for a cause in which I so desperately believe, and the ability to mentor and inspire young staff. The long-term satisfaction I had in that period was helping to start the Human Rights Campaign Fund in 1980, which is now the Human Rights Campaign. I was involved in starting the Maine Women's Lobby. My main regret in that period was the necessity of leaving and going to Washington, D.C., and my too hasty departure from Maine. While I was in Washington as the Executive Vice President of NOW, I survived. That's about what I can say from Washington. I survived the Reagan years in Washington, D.C. I survived the internal struggles of the women's movement. I survived the experience of being a medium-sized fish in the ocean of D.C. politics. I survived a terrified overnight in a District of Columbia abortion clinic. I survived a near lightning strike at the Los Angeles March for Women's Lives. I experienced with pride being arrested at the South African Embassy protesting apartheid. I was arrested in front of the White House protesting Reagan's lack of action on the burgeoning AIDS epidemic. All of those could be a lovely story if you want to hear them. They're very funny. But I'll spare you. My regrets there were turning down the chance to run for president of NOW. I was scared, I think, and still overweight and concerned always that that was a barrier for me. I also regretted not learning even more from working with Eleanor Smeal during her second presidency. My last 24 years at Family Crisis Services, I have been excited to create with my coworkers, some of whom are here today, the Young Adult Abuse Prevention Program, the Incarcerated Women's Program, the Elder Abuse Program, the Enhanced Police Intervention Project, all projects of the agency which are going today and which I am so very proud to be a part of. I also worked with the community to create Baxter Compensation Authority and compensate victims of sexual and physical abuse at Baxter School for the Deaf. I'm very proud of that work. To create the Maine Commission on Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. I helped create Maine's, as you heard, Maine's Homicide Review Panel to review domestic violence deaths, to create Maine Citizens Against Handgun Violence. I have trained domestic violence partners in Rio Grande do Norte, Brazil, in Arkhangelsk and Pskov, Russia, both incredible experiences of my life that I never would have had if I hadn't leapt into this passion of mine and said yes when people said, "You're going where?" So it's really take the advantages, take the opportunities that are in front of you. My regrets at Family Crisis Services in the current chapter: too much work, too little time, too little money. That really is the story of, I think, every nonprofit these days, but mine particularly. The missing pieces you haven't heard a thing about, and will only hear just a snippet, that I'm proud of: my 1997 induction into the Maine Women's Hall of Fame, my teaching of marine biology and human biology at the University of Southern Maine, and human biology and ethics at Springfield College. Can you tell my degrees were in biology? I've often told social work students that the way you get to be, you get to ahead in social work is you have a marine biology degree. That's the thing. We actually, at one time, that was the most common degree at my agency, I have to say. And we still have another staff person who has a marine biology degree. I was also very proud of founding and co-chairing the Matlovich Society, which was devoted to the educational and cultural experiences of gays and lesbians in the Maine. And I spent 15 years on the Board of Trustees of the Maine Criminal Justice Academy and chair of the board of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which unfortunately I've just been recalled to do again. My personal joys: finding the love of my life at 57, and having to wait 11 years to get married. And Lynn Carter is with me today. My sorrows: the people I miss the most: my mother, who lived the last 12 years of her life happily here in Maine, and whose tendency to save has made my life a lot easier, because I never shared that particular disease. I'm more likely to give my money away. I also miss my maternal grandmother, who was really an incredible mentor to me as a child. My father, who has also passed in the last few years. He's my Irish connection. And my dear friend Marge Rowe, who died in her 90s in Standish, who was just a wonderful, wonderful friend. And my friend Ron McClinton, with whom I started the Matlovich Society. All of those people so important to me, as are my current co-workers at Family Crisis. We started out when Ellie and I were working together. When she was on the board, there were 5 of us. Only 2 of us paid by real money. And now there are 27. So we've grown, we've made some changes, we've made some difference. Our work's not done. I used to think domestic violence would end in my lifetime, and I would be part of that, and I suppose I am part of it, but it's not going to end in my lifetime, and that's the tragedy. So I thank you so much for this honor. I really am very pleased to be here and very thrilled to receive this particular recognition. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lois, so much for sharing not just your successes and your joys, but your regrets, because I think sometimes we learn the most from those, and that's very helpful. On behalf of the Board of Trustees of the University of New England, it's my pleasure to present the 2000 Deborah Morton Award recipient by Pat Phillips, our trustee. Pat, would you step forward?
On behalf of the University of New England Board of Trustees, it is my pleasure to present 2013 Deborah Morton Award recipient, Dr. Barbara Verreau.
Dr. Barbara Verreau helped to create the Penobscot Community Health Center of Bangor in 1997 as one of only 2 providers in that area. She served as the medical director for PCHC until 2006, when she decided to devote all of her time to family medicine practice. She has helped spearhead PCHC's growth to what is now the largest community health center in Maine, with more than 700 employees. And so you can just imagine the amount of services that are provided. Services include a large dental clinic, a service for the homeless, and a mental health practice that is integrated with primary care. PCHC seeks to provide medical care for all in need, whether insured or not. Barbara has led this. She grew up in Skowhegan, Maine as the 10th of 11 children and a 4th-generation family member to work on the Dionne family firm. We are very proud today to welcome her as a Deborah Morton awardee.
Good morning. Thank you to the University of New England trustees, to the Deborah Morton Society Nominating Committee for considering me, and especially to Sister Norberta for nominating me for membership in the Deborah Morton Society. Sister Norberta was instrumental in my medical career in Bangor, as she was in several other small primary care practices in the Bangor area. I'm sad that she has left Bangor, and I wish her well in her endeavors in Connecticut. I'm a little glad that I didn't have to explain to her why I didn't have my hip replacement at St. Joe's 2 weeks ago, but as head of St. Joe's, she provided financial support for the startup of a private practice called Sunbury Family Medicine in 1992, which I opened along with 2 other women who were my residency classmates, 3 doctors, 1 office manager, and 1 office nurse. We were idealistic at the time, with our practice covering the spectrum of family practice, which included obstetrics and hospital medicine. I was not familiar with the concept of a community health center in 1992, but when I did hear about community health centers in the late 90s, I knew it was something I wanted to be a part of, a comprehensive clinic that kept its doors open to all, whether insured or not, a true safety net practice. Not easy to do if you are in private practice and need to pay the bills. It was 1997 that we selected a board, and a community health center's board is composed of at least 50% have to be patients of the practice, and the other members are members of the community. So 1997, we selected the board, submitted an application to the Bureau of Primary Health Care for designation as a community health center. Took a few years to actually become approved as that status. We were just 2 providers at that time with a total staff of about 8. Some thought we would not last a year, but now, as you heard, in 2013, we employ over 700 employees in the greater Bangor area. A large part of our growth has come from local practices asking to join us, from a large pediatric practice to the Eastern Maine AIDS Network, as well as other practices in the Bangor area, and just recently a practice in the Belfast area came on board. We have a large dental practice, as Dr. Rippich mentioned, a mental health practice that is a dream for a family practitioner to have right within your office space.
We are a training site for several students each year from UNE's PA and osteopathic schools, as well as for students from the Bangor programs at the University of Maine and Husson. I am often asked if I ever dreamed that PCHC would become so large, and certainly I did not. I can take some credit that I recognize the benefits of such a health center to our community, and that I helped to select those who supported our mission, from board members to administrative staff, especially a very proactive CEO named Ken Schmidt, and our medical staff. It was a joint effort of many people with a vision of improving access to comprehensive health care for the underserved population in Bangor that led to our growth. There was obviously a need in the Bangor area for a community health center, but I don't think any of us realized in the early days that PCHC would become so large and successful. We certainly have our constant financial struggles, considering the current healthcare reimbursement environment, but we managed to make it work. I am grateful to my family, especially my husband Don, whose love and strong character have always helped to guide me. To my daughter Sarah, who's living in Canada and not able to be here today. She has had the chance to experience the Canadian healthcare system, which, although is not perfect, does have a lot that we in the U.S. can learn from regarding access to healthcare. She was able to utilize their services as a person, as a student, and then somebody working in Canada, even though she's not a Canadian citizen. To my parents, who would be so proud that I'm receiving this award, and my siblings, many of whom are here today, all of them very supportive. As the next to the youngest of 11, I was the quiet one, so my accomplishments may have come as a surprise. But learning to work hard, and I guess surrounding yourself with people who make things happen, was something we all learned from our parents on our dairy farm in Skowhegan, and we put it to use in our lives in various ways. Congratulations to the other inductees, and thank you once again.
It's interesting to look at the different paths that these women have taken, from serving on boards for educational institutions, for symphonies, for things that elevate our feelings as a society, and then for the very personal pathways of caring for grieving children, caring for families in crisis in many ways, and then the medical care and the need that we have in the state of Maine for quality access to health care. And the thing that I think these ladies all know, but is only recently being reinforced by science, there's the new neuroscience study out, and it's coming out. There's going to be a book out this month that was profiled in the New York Times. Maybe some of you read it. But when we look at, as individuals, as human beings, what gives us joy, there is now a way to study through brain blood flow tracings. What areas of the brain light up? What happens when we feel happy? And so in studies where they've given people gifts, they've shown them beautiful things. Of course, parts of the brain light up. But the most joy that we experience as human beings is when we are giving something to others. That's what really motivates and serves to have the deepest feelings of satisfaction and is the most life-affirming. So if you see these pulsating cortexes up here lighting up on the stage, I think we, as I said, have a group of women who learned that lesson without having to have PET scan studies done, and have a lot to teach all of us. And so we're really honored to welcome you today to the Deborah Morton Society. And I now turn this over to Lori LaChance.
I'd like to first congratulate all the honorees today. And I'd like to welcome you to the Deborah Morton Society, and I hope you will participate fully and get to know the other women that were inducted before you, because I think you will find them an incredible inspiration and source of strength as you continue your careers and your work. And I'd also like to thank you. Thank you for sharing your stories today. Thank you for all you do. And thank you for making Maine, my home state, a really wonderful and treasured place to live. With that, I thank the audience for attending today, and I hope you'll join us outside to congratulate our recipients. Thank you.